What? You told
I
us
can't
to take
start
off.
talking again until you stop being quiet.
Do you stop being
Stop
quiet?
being quiet.
You want to stop being quiet. Oh, shit.
Stop talking.
The heat has gone to his head. Ahoy hoy and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk. I'm Shaun, the wind beneath your wings Polidano, and joining me as always is one of my favourite beaches, Aaron Best.
I bet you thought you were so funny in the middle of that intro.
Always. This weekend was chock full of racing. We had the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix and the first race of the F1 Academy season in Jeddah, just in time for International Women's Day. For those not familiar with F1 Academy, it's an all-female championship launched last year by the Formula One and headed up by Susie Wolff. We'll be dedicating an episode to this amazing racing later on in this season.
Yes, I've loved reading about the work that Formula One are doing to support diversity in their traditional male industry and looking forward to going into it in more detail in its own episode.
Yeah, and again, we have a special guest joining us in the studio.
He has made a request that we refer to him as a race mate and that the studio is referred to as the Let's Talk Garage.
All right, okay, well then. Today's race mate is an airline pilot, looks stunning in a Speedo, and will roast you quicker than a commercial oven at La Poqueta. One of two dads to Boston, a handsome and bossy dash hound, the boyfriend of my very own Beagle Bloodhound Maple, never short of an opinion on Formula One, and clearly even brainstormed his own ideas for this very podcast. Please welcome to Let's Talk Garage, Trav!
Hey. You. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Pleasure having you here, Dals. Now, us three always talk about what's going on in F1. We've even got our own Instagram group chat dedicated to F1 memes called the Norris Leclerc Appreciation Society. But memes aside, what I'd really love to know today is about how you got into F1.
Well, for me, it's probably a two-part entry into Formula One. When I was a little kid in school, they moved the Australian Grand Prix to Albert Park. Probably about 2 or 3 years in primary school, got to do an excursion because they wanted all the kids there. So free trip to the Grand Prix and no day of school.
That's a win.
Seeing fast cars go around the track and being the V12s at that point, not being able to talk or hear a conversation because they were that bloody loud. You know, got me interested in sort of racing. Plus, I had an older brother who absolutely loved F1. So he watched all the races growing up. We had Formula One on PlayStation. So I sort of got an interest from there. Then once I left school, I then was like, okay, I'll start watching a bit more. Had some friends, like I can actually afford to go to the race now. So started really getting into it, actually going to races, going overseas to races. And then I was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm hooked.
Now, with that Formula One love, do you have a favourite team or a favourite driver? Is that how do you barrack? Team or driver?
I think it's gone in phases where there was a favourite team and then it's sort of transitioned into more favourite drivers.
Has it changed since being a kid to now being an adult?
Well, yeah, because I think the teams that I was into when I was a kid don't exist anymore, or they stopped racing and then they've come back in a different form. So when I was a kid, I kind of always loved McLaren.
Yeah.
Mika Hakkinen, David Coulthard,
Yep.
they dominated, and the battle that they had with Ferrari was always there. Then when Red Bull came along and you had Mark Webber, I was kind of like always, you know what, Red Bull, that's my team. Then, you know, Danny Rick, absolutely great, love him. Then when he left Red Bull, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'd rather follow the driver now.
Did you actually hear that Channel 10 had to change all their promos
Yes.
this week?
I saw
So
that.
they accidentally published ads saying that this will be the first time that we have two Aussies going head to head at Albert Park. But in 2012 and 2013, we had Webber and Ricciardo
Yeah.
both racing.
Ugh.
So they quickly changed all their promotional material to not since 2013 have we had two Aussies go head to head at Albert Park.
I'm to fire the intern that put that one together.
Yeah, that's a bit awkward.
Particularly considering they are the broadcast partner. So Channel 10 have the broadcast rights in Australia.
Look, you'd think they'd be aware of that, but
Who are you then barracking for now? Still Red Bull?
no.
Oh.
Again, you sort of have that soft spot for sort of Danny Rick.
Yeah.
But I think I'm more Leclerc and Lando Norris. I think they're our two favorite boys out on the track at the moment.
Hence the name of the group
Yeah, I
chat,
was
which
about
makes
to
a lot of
say.
sense.
That makes sense for our group chat.
How many races have you been to?
I would have to say a good 10 or 12 over the years.
Yeah,
A majority in Australia,
Yep.
the Australian Grand Prix, but I've also been over to the US to the American Grand Prix in Austin.
That's cool.
That was about 7 years ago now. Absolutely amazing experience. Like, the racing was great, the people were great, the atmosphere was just such a buzz. And being in another country, talking with other people that loved Formula One and loved racing was just a whole other experience that you sort of get here, but not quite.
Yeah, I think sometimes there is a little bit of that kind of difference when you are traveling to then see how everyone looks at F1 in a completely different lens.
Absolutely.
I think Australia, it was a bit more corporate, especially when you're growing up. But going to Singapore, I just remember everyone was so fixated. Was it like that in Austin?
Yeah, definitely. And like, there were people that had driven 3 hours from Houston all the way over to Austin each day. They never really had gotten to Formula One until it came to America, but then they're like, absolutely loved it. And there were other people that had flown all the way from Minnesota. And they're big into their IndyCar and their NASCAR. And they're like, well, we love racing, so we'll come and look at this. And they're like, we love this. And they love the drivers of Hamilton and Alonso, Sebastian Vettel at the time. So they all had an extra sort of point of view as to why they got in.
Yeah, that's cool. Is there one track that you have a dream or aspire to be at for a Formula One Grand Prix?
I think of the current schedule, probably Singapore would be great to go to. But I think Abu Dhabi, it's that whole day into night.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen so much of the introduction of night races and, oh, how are they going to work? But this whole day into night race, it's just something different again. And the last race of the season, who knows how it's going to turn out for the final constructors standings and the final championship points that get awarded. So it's just got that extra little something about it.
Aaron, do you have a favorite track or dream track to attend to?
I really like the Mexican Grand Prix. The track just looks really cool. I do like Jeddah. I think the reason that I like Jeddah is getting to watch the onboards as they go through those back twisties, which you wouldn't get to experience as well if you were there in person. I think it's just watching the cars literally go wall to wall and be within an inch of either side as they're swinging through all of these twisties, I think makes that one of my favorite tracks. But yeah, I think to see in person, I really love the Mexican Grand Prix track.
Trav, getting to know you over the years, you are a big, passionate sports person. It's not just F1, AFL also. How does representation matter in sport?
When it comes to sport, you can see that there's still elements of reservedness and people holding back just because it's maybe not quite as safe and inviting to be their authentic selves. There are some sports where, you know, gay divers, gay ice skaters, even in tennis, they don't have an issue. And there's been very little issue with that. But when it comes to sort of team sports, there still seems to be that hesitation.
We're seeing with Formula One Academy coming through, and the same can be said for gay representation in the sport. There are female and gay sports people that can perform in these sports, but they are still a risk for sponsorship. And so the companies that would normally bankroll them getting into levels like Formula One just aren't there because they don't want to take that risk just yet.
Yeah, I think it's all on this precipice now, right? It's a generational thing. We've kind of discussed this about a number of topics that affect LGBTIQA plus representative people. I'm thinking now with more conversations like this, you know, seeing the F1 Academy coming up and sponsors coming in on that part there, hoping now we might just start to see a little bit more of that kind of groundswell and just a little bit more of that rainbow color scattered through.
I don't think it's the people within necessarily the sport and the teams that have the concerns and the issues with it. It's actually the supporter base and the fans that go to these sports and watch, you know, pay their money to be there. They're the ones that speak up about it because now with so much in social media, everybody can have their opinion and say what they want when they want it. And there's no consequences for it. It's probably that backlash or that potential backlash that people are concerned about and possibly scared about.
You end up with all of these comments coming through on social media posts, and then you watch very quickly in any industry, the social media manager go, oh, we need to delete that post because it's causing too much contention.
I think with this, again, I'm just really excited that we're having conversations around this, that we're seeing more Pride event stuff happening along these races. We're seeing a lot more of the drivers even showcasing or wanting to see diversity in sport, especially from an F1 perspective. There's always going to be a long way to go, but I'm hoping that we keep on seeing this progression keep on coming through, not only within this sport, but maybe within a whole wide number of team or individual sports in the future. So, how about we talk about this week's race?
So once again, a standard race weekend goes like this. We have 3 free practice sessions before a qualifying session, and then finally we have the race. This week's race, we actually saw a number of penalties handed out to the drivers. There are 3 main in-race penalties that can be handed down. The first and most common is a time penalty, usually 5 or 10 seconds. This must be served at the start of the driver's next pit stop. If the driver doesn't pit again after receiving a penalty, the time will be added to the end of their race and the results adjusted accordingly. If the penalty is served during a pit stop, the timer starts as soon as the car is stationary and no one can touch it until the penalty is served. The second is a race instruction such as conceding a place to another driver while out on track. This is usually handed down when a driver overtakes another in an unsportsmanlike way. The third is what's known as a drive-through penalty, where the driver is instructed to enter the pit lane, not actually pit, and then rejoin the race, suffering from the pit lane's 60 or 70 km/h speed limit. Some of the incidents that resulted in penalties this week were causing a collision, which carries a penalty of 10 seconds. This usually means hitting another car or failing to leave enough racing room and causing another car to hit you or a barrier. We also had leaving the track and gaining an advantage, which simply means making an overtake while all your wheels are off the track. A driver can avoid a penalty for this incident by returning the place immediately. If they don't, however, they will receive a 10-second penalty. And lastly, we saw unsafe releases, which is where a car is released from the pits into the path of another car already in the pit lane. This action carries a penalty of 5 seconds.
Thank you, everybody, to the newest FIA steward. Good work, good work. The Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend was a thrilling spectacle that kept fans on the edge of their seats from practice all the way to the checkered flag. The Red Bull duo of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez set the pace early, dominating the time charts in all practice sessions. Meanwhile, Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton faced challenges with the rear of the car, leaving him off the pace and struggling for confidence. In an unexpected twist, Carlos Sainz was sidelined with appendicitis, paving the way for the Englishman F2 protege Oliver Bearman to make his debut in the Ferrari. The action was briefly halted in FP3 when Zhou Guanyu lost control of the Sauber at turn 7, causing a significant crash that required extensive repairs. Qualifying was a nail-biter, with Verstappen securing pole position in his Red Bull, 0.3 seconds ahead of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Sergio Perez completed the top 3, with Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso and McLaren's Oscar Piastri rounding out the top 5. Piastri's performance was particularly exciting for me, as it continues to validate one of my predictions for 2024. Bearman's debut was impressive, qualifying 11th and just 0.9 seconds behind 10th place Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. Race day brought its own set of questions. Could Bearman score points for Ferrari? Would Leclerc challenge Verstappen for the win? And would the McLaren drivers just clash in their battle for supremacy? The race was a showcase of Verstappen's dominance, and he cruised to victory, leaving the rest of the field to fight for the remaining points. Perez overcame a 5-second penalty to finish second, while Lando Norris' controversial start and different tyre strategy placed him 8th, while his teammate Piastri engaged in a 27-lap battle with Lewis Hamilton for 4th place. Leclerc did his best to challenge the Red Bulls, but had to settle for 3rd, while debutant Bearman impressed with a 7th place finish. The performance gap between the top 5 teams and the rest was very evident, with intense battles for the final championship point. Kevin Magnussen scored 2 10-second penalties when battling against Albon in the Williams and Tsunoda in the RB. With his race heavily compromised, the Haas team asked Kev to back the pack up, allowing Hülkenberg enough time to pit and win that last point. The Christian Horner saga continues and provides us with no new answers. Helmut Marko, a strategic advisor for the Red Bull team, was called in for a meeting with Red Bull corporates. Before that meeting, Helmut alluded to the press that he might not stay on after this meeting. Verstappen's loyalty to Marko was made very clear. He stated he would leave the team if Marko did, fanning more flames about a rift inside the Red Bull team and its corporate mothership. In other news, Audi completed its takeover of Sauber, now owning 100% of the racing company. Audi will be the new name and works team in 2026. And lastly, the F1 Academy provided excellent racing, with Doriane Pin for Mercedes finishing first in both races. However, after missing the checkered flag in race 2 and continuing at race pace into the cool-down lap, she was given a red flag and 20-second time penalty, resulting in Abby Pulling securing P1 for Alpine. What a weekend of racing and drama! So Trav, did you enjoy this week's Grand Prix?
I did. I thought it was a really good race. Overall, with the crash at the start and the whole pitch strategy, how that worked out, it definitely created some interest from about 4th place down.
Yeah.
I saw a reel this week that was literally, oh, how did the race go? It's like, really great. Sergio Perez won. And it's like, no, but it says Max got P1. It's like, yeah, but we don't count that anymore.
Have you seen the one where it's like how to watch an F1 race? The screen set up with all the places beside, your little post-it note, putting it over the top, covering up first place.
Yeah.
It's a battle between 19 drivers.
Yeah.
Which, it's quite a good battle. I think at the end of last year, it got really tight.
It did, for sure.
Right, so I'm hoping maybe it's just going to be the same. Hopefully this is going to be the last 19 drivers that are just going to be fighting, which is going to be quite exciting, but it is just a little bit sad that it's just going to be Max consistent, potentially, at P1.
I personally found that this race was much better than last week. It felt like there was more racing happening. There was more exciting moments and things like that. But we're definitely seeing a very big divide between our top 5 teams and our bottom 5 teams. All the top 5 teams are competing with each other and the bottom 5 teams are competing with each other, and we're getting really good competitions in both of those sides, but we're really not seeing the bottom 5 teams getting close enough to try and nip at the heels of the top 5 teams very often.
Look, yes and no. I think the performance of the Haas team so far, like you would have picked them to be in those bottom 5 teams, and they're starting to edge there. Whether they can continue that for the whole season, we'll only find out.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about the influence Komatsu has had on the team and the change of strategy that he's brought, which obviously also played out a little bit contentiously this week.
Let's actually talk about it. So I see it in 2 ways. Smart, but also slightly problematic in the fact that it could set precedent in terms of a race strategy within those bottom 5 teams.
Realistically, what happened? He didn't break any rules.
No.
At lap 20, he was instructed to slow down and back the pack up. At that point, he was still behind Tsunoda. At lap 21, he hadn't listened and was still running at pace with Tsunoda. And then at lap 22, he overtook Tsunoda by driving off of the track and gaining a place against the rules. He copped a 10-second penalty but didn't have to pit, so he just wore it at the end of the race and then continued to drop 2 seconds a lap behind Nico until Nico had a 22-second gap between him and Magnussen, was able to pit and come out without having Tsunoda catch him. So technically he did break the rules, but he copped the penalty for it. As Albon put it, he bought the place through a penalty.
So it's one of those situations whereby we've never really seen this happen before. Probably because nobody's been in that situation before.
This is also a new penalty for this year. So originally it was 5 seconds. And the penalty has been upped to 10 seconds because the drivers were saying that it isn't as effective to have a 5-second penalty. But now we're seeing that the 10-second penalty, if you don't have to pit, is also not that big a deterrent. And you should probably be making sure that you give the drivers instructions that they have to return the place, that they don't have the option of taking a penalty, that they have to return the place within 2 laps.
Yeah. And I think that would be a fairer situation. I think what you've got now, it's not going to be something that everybody's going to be happy about. Nobody's going to love the rules no matter what. You're never going to please everyone. But this is one team that's had a situation and gone, we can make this work to our advantage. Question I ask for you is, what if he didn't have those penalties and he still did that? Would the teams be jumping up in arms? Because with no penalties, that's a legitimate race strategy that any team can implement.
I think that's the part where I'm on the fence about it, because it is a legitimate race strategy. He did not break rules on falling back the pace. The rules he broke was the fact that he was doing aggressive driving, right?
The rule he broke was leaving the track, and he copped the penalty for it.
But that's it. That's one thing, done and dusted. The plan on him backing away is just simple racing and strategy.
Well, that plan, as we saw, was implemented before he actually took the place from Tsunoda.
Yes.
So it was before he copped that 10-second penalty.
So he'd already had one 10-second penalty at the start.
The additional.
And then he was given the instruction to slow down the pack, but Tsunoda was still in front of him. He then didn't listen and overtook Tsunoda before slowing down. So the strategy over the team radio that he was given was don't compete with Tsunoda, slow the rest of the pack down. He apparently took it upon himself to go, you know what, I'm going to get in front of Tsunoda and then do what I was told. There have been reports that maybe that was the discussion. If this situation happens, that's what you do. We will tell you over the radio, don't go for Tsunoda. What you do is go for Tsunoda and then slow down.
That's a lot of pre-planning before a race to think of a situation that. I think this is teams, they were disadvantaged by it. They didn't get to benefit from it and they didn't get to implement it and think of it before someone else. And they're now just cracking the shits over it because they got duped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, there's no technical rules broken by the strategy that they had. It was just, well, they broke the rule. They took the penalty. It comes down to, again, the penalty may not be fit for purpose.
I think it's also these 5 teams realistically are just competing against one another most of the time for 0 points. To have one car potentially maximizing an opportunity like the Alpine falling out or, a kerfuffle and putting people back in those top teams, they're only been playing around for maybe 1 or 2 points in the grand scheme of things. If you've got a strategy to just secure that, go and do it.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. My thing with this comes back to, does now every one of those bottom teams now just start to play this one game and try to back people out, or do they just use it more as a tactic and it just becomes this weird behavior that happens in the back of the pack?
I think the defensive driving is fine. And Komatsu came out and he goes, there are regulations on how wide that car is, but Kevin made it twice the width. You haven't seen a car that wide ever. He was such a good driver. But I think if we continue to see drivers breaking the rules in order to gain this advantage, in order to implement this strategy, the FIA will stand in and go, you know what, no more 10 seconds. It is a drive-through, and if you overtake unfairly, you then have to enter the pit and you'll lose 15 seconds because you don't actually have to stop. The current strategy of a 10-second penalty is not enough of a deterrent for the drivers, particularly at a point in the race where they don't have to pit again.
Well, let's talk about another controversy that also happened in the race. Lando Norris and jumping the start. Because visually, you can see the movement of that car.
He crossed the line.
He jump-started.
It's obvious from the different angles. He moved before everybody else did. And you could see that those wheels went across that line.
I know.
Like, it's obvious as night and day.
Halfway through the race, the stewards were looking into it and they then gave him the all clear. Like, this is where we're bringing up this controversy now. The FIA, have they gone the right decision? What would you have done?
Well, I guess probably trying to get in their minds would be, did jumping the start, quote unquote, give him an unfair advantage at the start and going into that first corner? Looking at the footage and how it all panned out, I don't really think it did. Because he rolled forward, yes, but he stopped. And then everybody else started going. And then he was that split second again behind everyone else.
I would say that it would have been almost a disadvantage to his race because he now was trying to fumble around stopping and taking off at the same time. After the race, Bernie Collins was on the Sky Sports broadcast talking about data the FIA would have used to determine if it was a jump start. They don't just rely on the visuals from what we saw in Lando's car, what we saw in Russell's car, where it clearly looked like he had jumped and he'd gone over the line, but whether or not the sensor inside the grid box was tripped as well. And she said that there's potential that he didn't trip the sensor. It didn't count as a jump start.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They've got so much more technology and data and information available to them that we as the audience don't get, that the commentators from Sky Sports don't get. Is Mercedes going to then go to the FIA and go, we're going to challenge that decision, and then they'll have to put everything out on the table? Or are you just going to go, it made no difference, let's just move on and focus on the next race?
Has Mercedes issued a challenge at all?
I don't think so.
I think maybe to your point, Trav, like there was no big gain to it. So yes, it might have caused a bit of frustrations maybe on the Mercedes end, but like it's just...
Ultimately, it didn't do shit.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised that we don't see this more often. The way that the lights work is that the 5 sets of lights come on at, I think it's 2.5 second intervals. They turn off anywhere from around 3.4 to 4.7 seconds. So every race is random so that a driver can't practice based on the first set of lights coming on when they can go, that they have to wait to see the lights go out every time. So they're randomized going out. So I'm surprised that we don't see more drivers jumping. They're trained that well to respond that quickly to the lights going out every time. It's not something that they can pre-plan for.
And the cars as well, the way they're set up, that it's just a quick flick and they're gone. They've already got that start mode. It's not the drivers going, right, I've got to put it into gear, I've got to set it all up. It's ready to go, and so all they've got to do is push a button and it's gone.
Whilst we're on the subject of maybe penalties and race drama, what was everyone's thoughts about the first pit stop under the safety car and a lot of the double stacking that occurred?
It worked for a lot of teams. You're able to get in, have that one pit stop and not have to do another one. Great.
Fabulous.
It didn't work for a lot of other teams. Ricardo had a 40-second pit stop under the safety car.
Was it that long?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what ruined his race. He pitted under the safety car and then came out last place because he had a 40-second pit stop.
I also question the whole Ricciardo thing at the moment too.
They identified issues in his car in qualifying, but they couldn't fix it because of Parc Ferme.
Sergio got his penalty at the pit stop.
Yep, because he was released in front of Alonso, who had to brake. So he got a 5-second penalty. That didn't ultimately affect his race because he ended 5 seconds ahead.
Well, that's another thing, is that with penalties, if you turn around and say, maybe you do have to serve them early on, could it have meant that Leclerc actually got back in front of him and then potentially changed the way the race panned out for them? Just because Magnussen is back in the pack, Perez was way out in front, so he had the clear air to go, I can put some extra space and then it's not going to make any difference. So is the penalty thing all up a question of they need to be served within a certain time frame to make it a bit more fairer, because you could gain advantage of some sort early in the race, but then if you don't have to serve it till the end when the race is over, does that have the potential to impact who finishes where?
And that was something that they were talking about in the race, the media organization that does a lot of reviews for Formula One. In this case, they were talking about gaining an unfair advantage, that you kind of go, okay, if you gain an unfair advantage, you've got 2 laps to return it. If you don't return it, then you have to do the drive-through of the pit lane, which isn't used very often as a punishment because it adds like 15 seconds to the race. So it can cause a driver a lot more of a punishment than the 10 or 5-second penalties under pitting. But you're right. Like if you do something that gains a penalty towards the end of the race, but you don't have another pit stop, you can just wear it and hope that you finish where you need to finish.
We're only talking this about Red Bull because they've just got such a brilliant car and they've got the advantage not only with the speed, but the way they're moving on that track, that it was easy for Perez to kind of just dismiss that 5-second penalty? Or is it more about the penalty itself not being fit for purpose?
That's probably both, really.
The stewards should make a call. It shouldn't be a blanket, this is the penalty for this action. I think the stewards should make a call and go, okay, based on the time that the action was taken, if the action was taken in the final stages of the race where there's no longer going to be any pit stops, they make a decision whether or not it is a time penalty or whether it is instructions, if it was overtaking illegally, that they have to concede the place, or whether they have to do a drive-through. They have to find a way to adjust the punishment based on the race, not just the action that caused the punishment.
I think it's hard because you still need to set some sort of hard and fast rules with it. I think it comes back to the Lewis Hamilton versus Verstappen, where it changed up Lewis Hamilton's title fight, with the restart. That felt very much at the race for that particular moment, and that turned up to be a whole big thing. There needs to be some sort of hard and fast rule, but you can at least say it's from Bible, but do you kind of maybe have different rules in certain sections of the race you might be able to then change or tweak?
I think they should say, okay, these are the options for our penalty for this particular offense, and then choose one, as opposed to it being this offense, this penalty. And then obviously we saw Haas go, well, we've got 10-second penalties. Let's just use this to our advantage for our other teammate.
If you're an F1 driver, what penalty would you have to go and serve?
Based on my playing of F1 22 and F1 23, I haven't played F1 24 yet, I'd get a black and white flag for exceeding race limits because I cut so many corners.
Trav?
I think I'd probably have the stewards pulling me aside at the end of the race just from pure abuse over the radio.
Yeah.
The full Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah. It's just constant beeping. They have to
Sky Sports would hate me because they couldn't play any of it.
I reckon I would be unsafe release. End chapter.
Yeah, that's right. Keep you locked up.
Yeah. Shouldn't be allowed on track at all. Why'd you let him go?
I'm sorry, sir, but you're not allowed in the paddock.
Ah, damn it. Well, watch me drive. Outside of all the penalties that occurred, let's talk about some weird, fun, and amazing positives that came out of the race there too. Oliver Bearman.
Hello.
Yeah.
Wait. Let's clarify. Why did you like Ollie Bearman being in the race?
Because of his dad. His dad looked hot. I think he had an amazing race.
He did.
Right, to be on call and be like, well, Sainz is unwell. You now need to jump into this F1 car for us, and to do what he had to go and do. Well done.
And with very little practice in the actual car.
He got FP3 and then he got qualifying and then straight into the race.
Yeah, because he's only been doing like sim work for Ferrari at minimum, right? So that's a completely different experience.
He went from fully expecting to race in F2 from pole to all of a sudden being put into F1 car, literally from pole in F2 to Formula One racing in less than 48 hours. I loved seeing the photos of his headrest in the car because he's obviously unpracticed in a Formula One car. Formula 2 cars don't pull as many Gs as the F1 cars do. So he was constantly smashing his head against the headrest. It crumpled. By the end of the race, it had dints in it. The official F1 Instagram posted pictures of it and he commented going, yeah, some more notice so I can practice a little bit more would be great.
Would he get a headache?
I get a headache wearing my helmet on my motorbike if I'm traveling at 100 kilometers an hour just from the helmet pushing against my face. I can't imagine the speed and the Gs that they are experiencing, how uncomfortable they would be at the end of the race. And you can see the lines in their face from how hard that helmet is pushing into their face.
I just thought he did a fantastic job. He was so close to getting into Q3 for qualifying and hopefully being in that top 10 pack. But to then, finish 7th overall, which was a 4-place jump, commendable effort, really, really, really good effort.
Absolutely. And just being able to provide, those bottom 5 teams, just a bit of a look in to say, okay, here's an up-and-comer that maybe the next few years we might be looking to get someone like him actually in a race seat. And to think what he could actually do driving the car for a full season.
He looked hungry. He wasn't just, I don't know.
Yeah, he looked like he could do with a meal.
Yeah. He's a twink. They don't eat. But he was being aggressive. He was taking action. He wanted to do some overpasses here or there, use the engine and the Ferrari power that he had. He wasn't just being stationary, which I thought might have occurred because of being so new in the car.
Almost the shock factor of I'm driving in the Formula One car now. Don't crash, don't crash.
Yeah.
But he actually took the race on.
Yeah.
And his strategy was different to most of the other drivers on the field. He started off on the soft tyres. I wonder whether that was to give him a little bit more grip to overcome some of the nerves that he might be having starting in Formula One. He fully took advantage of that. He had the extra grip over all the other cars on mediums. And for his first few laps, he was really pushing. He was pushing in first. He was pushing in the second lap. And he managed to gain some ground there. And he was giving it to a lot of the other drivers.
Yeah, I thought it was really great to watch. I think it was one of the highlights, actually, of watching the race.
Absolutely. And you love seeing those stories. And you think about when other drivers that we now know and love got their first races and you sort of see how they approached it. It's okay, I wonder how they're going to go. Are they going to crash out or are they going to make it to the end of the race? Where's it going to go? And you can now have him and go, I remember when he did his first race.
I also like the fact that most of the drivers also gave him a bit of applause. They came up to him at the end of the race and
they crossed to him finishing his cool down lap, parking up behind Hamilton, and Hamilton just walked over to him and gave him a hug and congratulated him. I'm like, that's so nice.
It was like from the movie Twins of Arnie Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, though, with between the size comparison. It was
He's tall.
Yeah.
He's really tall.
Also,
how does he fit in the car?
Yeah, because the seat would be changed. They would at least have a carbon fiber seat ready just in case. But is there other things I need to adjust for the car? Because Sainz and even him in terms of height are completely different.
Probably. I'd say so, but that's for the engineers to deal with.
Can we get someone from a Ferrari, please, here to tell us? Because that would be fun. That would be great to know.
It was interesting to see some news articles coming out today talking about the fact that obviously Haas is going to be very interested in him because they're a customer of Ferrari. It's expected that he will definitely be a name in the driver market this year, and to see whether or not he does get the opportunity, for example, to race for Haas for a couple of years before moving up to Ferrari, because Lewis is an aging driver. He's not going to be in the Ferrari for very long. He's moving to Ferrari at 38, I think he is. Whether or not he stays in the car for very long remains to be seen, but there's the opportunity there for them to try and secure Bearman by putting him into the Haas with the expectation that he moves to Ferrari over the next 4 years or so.
Well, that's the thing, is that anything can happen in this circus that is Formula One, and they could have those plans and they could be in place, but that's not to say another team like a McLaren or an Aston Martin come along and go, here, we want you to drive for us. Here's this contract. It's very much is an individual sport, so how could you not turn down a gig like that when there's no guarantees that you would necessarily get to Ferrari? Because yes, Hamilton's older, But look at Alonso. He's still driving well
Yeah.
at his age. So you don't know how long Hamilton could potentially last at Ferrari. So there's no guarantees in this sport other than the contract in front of you at the time.
Yeah, agree. I also find it quite interesting that everyone's trying to now do the memes or the comparison of Bearman and Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari and trying to make that kind of something to explore. Kid did well, right? And give him the credit that he deserves in that. I'm excited to see Lewis Hamilton. Season just needs a good car underneath him to then take that Ferrari and hopefully run with it. Be completely different in terms of their driving styles and experience. And I'm hoping that it is a strategy with Lewis and the Ferrari that it pays off for them in hopefully a championship. But we'll wait and see.
If they can provide him with a car that's going to match Red Bull, anything's possible.
And that's true.
Because we know how good of a driver Hamilton really is.
And that's the thing, that he came out again this week and he was frustrated about the car, and he literally said, like, these are the same issues that we've been having for years. They're not improving. Again, similar to what we saw in Drive to Survive, he's so disenfranchised with the team and the car that he's not going to get anything out of it this year, I don't think. He's probably just got his sights on Ferrari next year.
Let's quickly talk about Lewis Hamilton and even the Oscar Piastri battle. I thought that was showcasing Lewis Hamilton's talent in that shit car that he does have, but also it was just a great battle to see, like, young and old kind of battle it out. Piastri had a couple of moments on finally getting through, but having to then come back because he kind of overshot the turn.
Exactly. He went off track.
Off track. And then he had to, you know.
Well, he didn't have to give it back, but he did.
Yes.
That's probably the more sportsman thing to do.
Yes.
And so Oscar came out and talked about exactly what was happening during those moments. And he was saying his DRS just was not as effective at getting him close to Hamilton. Hamilton's straight line speed, he still pipped him by, he only had like 1 or 2 kilometers per hour over Hamilton. So he wasn't able to gain enough speed to overtake. Just the act of trying, he was depleting his battery so much that through the back half of the race, he was having to recharge as much as possible to go for another round. Recharging meant that Hamilton was able to draw a little bit more distance. And so when they got back to that straight, he was back in the exact same place. And that's why for 21 laps, he stayed behind him, because Hamilton would hold him off at the straight and then pull away through the back half of the track and then hold him off at the straight again. That's why they asked Oscar at the end of the race what could have helped. And he's like, I could have chopped off my back wing. That would have been great.
Just to give him more of that.
Just to get rid of that drag.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool. Even when it kind of then Oscar got him at the end, even just the commentary between Lewis saying, well, that car, look how fast it can actually go through those Jeddah quick turns. What are we doing with our car? Like, we're still in the same place. We can't follow them through this. But he was able to at least build it back up during those kind of longer straights. And I thought it was a great battle.
I loved it. It was great to watch the two of them battle it out. And like you said, the Jeddah track is just like watching the front wing cameras as they would go through those back twisties was just wild. Even watching it through a TV screen, you kind of sit there and go, whew, as they like get so close to the very edge of that wall.
I mean, some drivers a little bit too close.
Poor Stroll.
Oh.
Well, that's the thing, I think particularly during that battle, I remember seeing an image on screen where they showed the track and they showed in highlight orange and that teal green where Hamilton was faster and where Piastri was faster. And that was really interesting to see, because it wasn't just a case of this long section where Hamilton was quicker and then this long section where Piastri was quicker. It was actually all spotted throughout the entire track, you know, which then is what gave us such a great battle, not just with them, but even Norris racing, like so many of those battles that happened because of the way that track was set up and how the cars are a little bit different, and some are quicker in the turns, some are better on the straights.
I do like this track. I think even just on how shiny and neon and colorful it all was, I thought it was kind of cool. The racing was, I wouldn't say it was the best thing I've seen, but you had those moments where you were paying attention as to what was going on and wanting to go and see what the outcome of that battle was going to be.
For this track, you kind of have to watch for that final turn, that final hairpin where they literally almost touch the wall on their approach on the right-hand side. They swing into the apex and come within an inch of the wall on the left-hand side and then end wide. And again, within an inch on the right-hand side as they come out of that corner before they hit the main straight. That hairpin always gets me because they're approaching that at full throttle. So like 315 kilometers an hour, they come into that hairpin and come so close to the wall. It's such an exciting track to watch.
What's your thoughts on Alpine?
The one lap that Gasly limped through.
In the words of Ariana Grande, thank you, next.
He didn't even get through the formation lap before he knew that there was problems with the car. They literally boxed him, I think, before the first lap. I don't think he made it to the second lap.
I don't think he did. It was, within that, after the start, they were like, box. He was in.
They're retiring the car. And just to watch him through the formation lap come over the radio going, I have gearbox troubles. And then towards the end of the first lap, just seeing box, we're retiring the car. You can't write this stuff. How much has gone wrong in that team that their car can't even finish a lap?
I'm interested to see where this season goes for Alpine, and it's probably not going to be the on-track stuff because they're probably not going to be on there for much of the race because of issues, reliability, or drama. It's going to be the strategic, what's happening within the team, what are investors going to be saying, what are other stakeholders, because it is just turning out to be an absolute shit show.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
And thoughts on the RBs? I think Tsunoda gets another one on Daniel Ricciardo this week.
And he did cop a penalty, which still put him ahead. So he did finish, I think, 11th or 12th. He then copped a 10-second penalty at the end of the race for unsportsmanlike conduct and was dropped down to 15 ahead of Ricciardo's 16th place. Ricciardo lost his last position to Sargent, so he was 15th and lost a position to Sargent because of that spin that he made in the final lap, which he admitted was his fault.
Just looked rookie. Am I expecting more from Daniel Ricciardo?
I think there's still gremlins in the car that they just haven't worked out. That's what he said. He goes, I've been driving for a long time. I know when something is wrong. There is something wrong with this car. And
well, I can say that.
Even Tsunoda is having trouble with his car. So I think once they get those gremlins fixed, it's only been 2 races. Once they get those gremlins fixed, Ricciardo is confident that he'll do well. So we'll see what happens towards the end of the season.
It ain't no carbon copy of last year's Red Bull car. You can definitely see that. I think it is just getting very disappointing. Maybe I'm just over it.
They are the sister team. They get second choice with so much coming through. Like I said, it's race 2.
Yeah.
And they don't get as much testing as they used to quite a few years ago. It's a small window that they have testing in Bahrain, and then it's straight into the season.
Yeah, and these cars are a lot more complex, especially with all that air underneath the car.
Like, how many times when Australia was first race of the season that you saw cars retiring within the first 10 to 15 laps because they just weren't ready. There were so many things wrong with them. And it wasn't until they got 5, 6, 7 races in where they'd had a chance to analyze the data and go, this isn't working. The drivers being able to say, we need to do this, we need to do that. And them actually being able to get that development done in race.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much a simulator and practicing before the season gives you.
And maybe it's just the fact that because there's so much now content, we're hearing stories, you watch Netflix Drive to Survive and you have the little soft spot for Ricciardo to have that little comeback. Maybe that's just all this build up and I'm just now going, you could do it, you could do better.
And,
kind of thing.
The whole fantasy dream of him going back to Red Bull.
Yeah, true.
You kind of want to see him drive really well now, especially when he wasn't driving last year and then all of a sudden he was. And it's like, oh, he's driving and he's back into it. Yep, that's the Danny Rick that we all know. And now it's the start of the season. It's like, oh, not doing so well. You just want him to be like, no, you should just already be there.
Agree.
If it was any other driver, you'd probably like, oh, yeah, probably right. There's gremlins in the car. But because it's him, you just sort of want that. You want that bit extra from him.
Okay, so the random trends in this race that I saw, lots of lights. We had an entire drone show happening at the start. Not only drones, they had these weird multi-wing drones that had fireworks coming off the back of them. Then they had the drones that were doing the driver helmet spinning around. They morphed into the numbers to count down to the start of the formation lap. The entire track is lit up like the night sky. Everything in between the track is lit up in multi different colors. The entire thing, given it's a night race, they've gone all out on the lighting.
Well, I've noticed during the qualifying and then saw it again during the race, where doesn't have a Ferris wheel these days? But they've got a Ferris wheel lit up in neon lights with a neon Formula One car on it. I'm like, sure, why not?
Does Australia get one? Can we get one? I know we're not a night race, but can we just...
I think we had a Ferris wheel last year over on the side near the golf course.
little kiddie Ferris wheel.
Yeah.
Melbourne doesn't do Ferris wheel very well. Just look at the Melbourne Star.
Yeah.
6 years and it's been broken the entire time.
I did enjoy that drone show. Drones have come far. That's all I've got to say. It was good.
Look, again, when you're doing a night race, it's so much easier to add that extra bit of visual entertainment.
Yeah.
Because day race, you can't really do much.
All of your excitement has to be things that are for the people attending the race. There's not a lot that you can do that's visually stunning from away from the race during a daytime race.
No.
Whereas, the night they've got all this opportunity. You saw how big Las Vegas went last year with all of their light shows and the way they did the staging and all that kind of stuff with the drivers coming out. They went full throttle.
America, they live and breathe that shit.
And in your Arabic countries, they do have a lot of money. So they may as well go and put on a big show.
You look at what they've done with Abu Dhabi to try and build that up. Even Bahrain. Like, I think Bahrain was probably one of the first races where, like, you see at the end, it's just all the fireworks going off down the main straight just to try and add that other little bit of excitement at the end of the race. If it's finished, like, crescendo, they want people to see that and go, oh, this looks amazing. I want to go there, because they're now trying to attract the tourists and the people to go there to watch the race and then visit the city.
I would. I like the track. The racing looks pretty cool. The lights. I'm attracted to lights. Like a moth to a light.
It is interesting to see, like you said, how far drones have come, that they are doing these huge aerial shows with hundreds of drones. I remember it was something like 4 or 5 years ago, they had tried to do it over the Sydney Harbour, and out of 500 drones, 50 of them ran into each other, and they then had to fish them out of the harbour. To now be at a point where we've got just these huge spectacles happening in the night sky above the race. Or even a couple of weeks ago, Red Bull released a promotional video of a drone being able to keep up with the Formula One car for the entirety of the Bahrain circuit. The drone was able to travel at 350 kilometers an hour and track the Red Bull the entire way around the track. And they showed it was a very Red Bull branded drone following a very heavy branded Red Bull car. The amount of money that Red Bull spend on just fun things must be insane.
Well, it gives you wings.
It's not, they're not allowed to say that anymore.
What?
Yeah, they stopped that.
What?
It's gone.
When?
It is now like vitality for your mind and body or something like that. They got rid of Red Bull gives you wings because I think it was something about like it not being real.
Welcome to advertising. I would like to bring up one thing. First time safety car was out at a race. Interesting, cool. I like the Aston Martin Vantage. If we can, from Aston Martin, give me one, I would greatly appreciate it, and especially in that green. Mwah. Very, very cool.
Why would they give you one?
I think I deserve it. See how high pitched my voice went?
There's probably a few other things you deserve, but you're probably not going to.
Oh, stop. Stop. I think it was the first release of the car, right? It's a new Vantage. So, again, it's a great promotional opportunity to then have the car out there. I liked it. Looks a very sexy car.
She was blinking, though.
What do you mean blinking?
Driving around the track, like opening, closing her eyes, blinking at you when she had the lights on. It was
Oh.
It was kind of like,
Are you talking to me?
I don't see anybody else around here.
Yeah,
You must be blinking at me.
I love this. All right, silence. Let's talk about our tops and bottoms of the week. Aaron, we'll start with you.
Okay, so my top was the battles that we saw this week. As we've already touched on, you've got Piastri and his 21-lap battle with Lewis, just watching the two cars go for it. You had Bearman with the likes of Hulkenberg. You had Magnussen, as we said, making the car as wide as possible to keep the back of that pack behind him. I think this week, compared to last week, we saw a lot more memorable driving. Last week, we spoke about the fact that there were lots of overtakes that obviously weren't important because we didn't really watch them or remember them. Whereas this week, there was just a lot more competition between the drivers for individual places. For me, my bottom, following the race, again, my bottom seemed to be following. No, my top last week was after the race.
Your bottom is just following the race. What? Your bottom is what?
My bottom
Let him say what?
Yay.
My bottom this week is the way that everyone except for Oscar talked about the upcoming Formula One Grand Prix in Melbourne. They interviewed Christian Horner. They interviewed Zach. They interviewed a couple of the drivers, and all of them are like, oh, yes, in a couple of weeks in Melbourne. And I'm like, no, it's Melbourne. Oscar was the only one, obviously, that I saw interviewed who could say it because he's from here.
They've been here several times.
But anyone always says Melbourne.
Trav.
My top for the week was, well, sort of Oliver Bearman, but more so marketing team from Formula One when they released a headline talking about a super sub Oliver Bearman getting a race seat. Because let's be honest, who doesn't like a super sub around here? I think, like, we need more of that. Well, we need more of that fun, tongue-in-cheek kind of.
There's nothing that says that Formula One do not have a game marketing intern than the fact that they let that go to print.
Whoever wrote that headline, we want to interview you. Like, that's brilliant.
Marketing gold.
Super sub.
Yeah, and the fact is, he had a really good race as well. So props to the guy. As for my bottom of the week, goes to Mr. Lance Stroll. Because under no pressure whatsoever, he decides to hit one wall, drive off the other side of the track, crash into another wall, which then brought us out the safety car and change probably the direction of most of the race with the double stacking in the pit lane, the different tyre strategies, because most teams went straight onto the hard, apart from 4 drivers that didn't. So,
didn't he also do it in free practice?
He hit the same wall.
I'm pretty sure. I think it was him. He made the mistake twice.
Daddy's money's getting him pretty far.
Daddy's money going into the Astons like this season, they seem to just be a little bit flat, or those teams have just moved the pace up. Like Aston doesn't look too crash hot at the moment.
I think it's probably a bit of both. You've got the bottom teams sort of moved up a little bit, and the Astons haven't quite kept up to your McLarens and your Mercedes at this point yet.
Yeah.
So who are your tops and bottoms, Shaun?
My top is Sergio Perez. Hear me out. I think he's being very consistent in that car. He had his 5-second penalty, was able to capitalize on that and still come in second. He just looks a lot more comfortable in this vehicle compared to maybe like last year and seeing on how he was performing there. I think what he's doing, he's being that team person. He's doing what Red Bull wants and he's giving them that 1 and 2. Let's see if he's able to then maybe battle it out with Max. But so far, he's like the only contender that can. So I'm going to give him my top because I think he had a really good race this week. My bottom is not having an 11th team, right? We've been hearing all this news about the whole Andretti and Cadillac wanting to come in and add an 11th team here. And the reason for this comes back to Oliver Bearman and Liam Lawson. Imagine having that youth already in the pack. It would just be so exciting to see instead of having to then wait to see that a race seat will come up. I would love to then just have them on the field already and have that 11th team for them to be a part of it. Alrighty, boys. Thank you so much for a fantastic episode. Special thanks to our sexy guest, Trav. As we enter our last lap, I have one more question for you. What are you most looking forward to for the upcoming F1 season?
It's a bit of a curly one there because there's probably a lot to look forward to with the driver movement that's going to happen throughout the year. We know Hamilton's going to Ferrari next year, so Leclerc's staying. Where's Sainz going to go? Plus all the drama at Red Bull, what's going to happen there with Perez and with Max? There's so much to play out. Plus seeing some of the other lower teams, if they can get some consistency into their racing, start to get those points, start to build, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think 2024 is turning out to be a very exciting season. I think there is just a lot of drama, fun, and on racetrack goodness. So I think it's going to be quite exciting. Again, thank you so much for joining the Let's Talk Garage.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. I'm calling it now, though. I want to change our group chat name to the Bearman Norris Leclerc Appreciation Society. Can you do that for me?
Oh, we'll see if he gets another race or two.
Oh, but come on. Daddy Bearman.
He's already been tipped as having more points than Alpine at the end of the season.
And Sargent being the 21st driver with 0 points.
Well, it's either Sargent or Gasly. Both of them have been tipped at that. Currently sitting 21 out of a season of 20 drivers.
Damn it.
So coming up, we actually have a little break as the teams make their way to Australia and get settled into a whole new time zone. The Australian Grand Prix starts on March 21st here in Melbourne. We are super excited. All three of us are actually going to be there over the course of the race weekend. Following the race, we will be jumping back in here with our Australian GP race mate, Jody. I promise you won't want to miss Jody's Let's Talk debut.
I can't tell you how much I'm excited for the Australian Grand Prix. Like, got the tickets, they're shiny, finding some lanyards. Like, I'm very excited to be there. Now, if you've subscribed to Let's Talk on your favourite streaming platform, why not give us a rating? You know, think of it as a cute, constructive feedback and support for our little gay channel. After leaving us with an amazing 5-star rating, why not head over to our Instagram page at Let's Talk Show and let us know your tops and bottoms of the week. That's it from us today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Let's Talk.
Let's Talk is hosted, produced, and edited by Shaun Polidano and Aaron Best. Our show is an entertainment podcast, and the views expressed by the host and guests are meant for entertainment purposes only. Let's Talk is recorded in Paran in Naarm, Melbourne, and we would like to acknowledge the Burrarong people of the East Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land, and pay our respects to Aboriginal elders past, present, and emerging.